Right. So the regular season is all done, and Super Rugby is now heading into its final series, just as we start to enter the depths of winter. Of course, this year rather than eight, we've got six teams in the playoffs, and so yeah, look, there has been a bit of talk about this new format and perhaps some of that perhaps maybe it hasn't been thought through as much as we hope, but more on that. So look, I thought we will talk about that in a bit in this video. But first, we've got to talk about the Highlanders.
Fakatava has played it beautifully. Robinson has his kick charge. Oh,
Look, so got my wooden spoon out of the dishwasher, although apparently you shouldn't put wooden spoons in a dishwasher, but who cares? The Highlanders, of course, winning finishing with the wooden spoon for the first time since the 1997 Super 12 season, of course. So, yeah, pretty much nearly 30 years ago. I guess there has to be some caveats. Were the Highlanders really that bad? Not necessarily. And if you look at the results, yeah, there have been some close defeats. I guess look. But I have watched the Highlanders this season. Look, while the rugby at times has been tough to watch, there is undoubtedly talent there, and I think it is definitely. I don't think the Highlanders are in the same scenario that they were in the 2000s, 2010s, when of course there were financial issues. They were playing in half-empty Carisbrooke. The players were pretty much cast-offs from the other franchises. I think, in fact, the Highlands are in a very, very good position. There's still there's still engagement from the zoo, and and look, we've got a couple. There are lots of really good young players who could do the same job that the likes of Aaron Smith, Ben Smith, Lima Sopoanga, Elliot Dixon, etc. All those guys who were part of the 2015 championship winning team. There's absolutely no reason why the likes of JRK, Fabian Holland, Ethan de Groot, Caleb Tangitao. There's absolutely no reason why they can't go on to emulate what the 2015 side did. Look, I know Super Rugby is tough, but yeah, it is just, I think with Jamie Joseph there with the talent, and there's a lot of young players. I guess we were sort of expecting that execution was going to be a bit of a tricky thing. So you got that context as well. We don't, back in '97, of course, you had South African teams. Now you've got it is a much smaller competition with Moana, and Moana Pacifica certainly had a huge improvement this season on the back of RD Xavier. And look, I guess, and we only got the win spoon because we didn't win as many games as Fiji and Drew, even though we had the same number of points. So yeah, look, a disappointing season, but I guess certainly there will be things to improve on. I guess my biggest concern is the halves combination. I mean, look, elsewhere across the team, there is definitely we're stacked midfield. We're stacked up. We're looking pretty good up front. Besides besides Holland, De Groot, you got Sean Withy. There's a host of couple of players who really be good. I guess the Hasty. It looks like the Hasty Robinson combo is gonna be the half combination for the future if they can develop. So So I mean, unfortunately, there were injuries to those guys, so we didn't quite get to see. I mean, no disrespect to Fakatava and Miller, but I think and I guess you can say that for Sam Gilbert, but I guess I think we've sort of seen a ceiling of what they can do. I think Miller, Fakatava, and at best are probably going to be backups unless unless they have a really, really good off season or NPC and they can show that that there is more to them. But yeah, look, I guess if it's not, I guess you'd have to be a bit concerned. I guess that is Fale Sanga as well, still unproven, but. So those are the big question marks that we need to certainly address in the off season. But look, I mean, I think we need to give it another season. I just take this as one season that there's a bit of an aberration for the Highlanders, and we'll just move on. So unless you've been living under a rock, we know our playoffs are, it is 6 teams, as I said, 1 versus 6, 2 versus 5, 3 versus 4. The first game is 3 versus, it's 2 versus 5. That's Crusaders Reds on Friday night. And then Saturday night you have 1 versus 6, Blues versus Chiefs. Yep. Good old derby. I'd say this is the closest thing New Zealand rugby has to some sort of, regional derby in Super Rugby. Yeah, Blues Chiefs. Of course, you got the Waikato Expressway. I anticipate a lot of Blues, quite a number of Blues fans will probably make the trip down from Auckland to Hamilton to watch this game. Because they'll be back in Auckland by midnight. So yeah, I think, and then so this should be a cracking game. And finally, finally from Canberra, you've got Brumbies Hurricanes, which is 3 versus 4. Now, I think Super Rugby has come under a bit of fire for the way they scheduled this. As the reason, I should mention, of course, the reason there is, so Chiefs being top, they play the Blues. So if the Chiefs do lose to the Blues, they still do get another life next week, which it's sort of like an elimination finals. And yeah, in effect, depending on results elsewhere, Brumbies and Hurricanes could very well end up playing the following weekend, which would suggest perhaps this last game of this playoff round could very well be a dead rubber. Teams have the option of being able to switch their sides 45 minutes before kickoff. So yeah, so what I'm saying is that there's a real chance that this Brumbies Hurricanes game, which should have really been ideally, like a sudden death game, could very well be a non-event with lots of players resting, knowing that the Brumbies and Hurricanes will be playing the following week. Look, I don't know what the situation there is. It because of travel time, etc. This certainly feels like this should have been the Friday night game. They don't necessarily have to play at 5 o'clock Australian time. They could play at 7. I couldn't see why they could play at 7:30. You could have, and of course, there's been more push to return to afternoon rugby in New Zealand and Australia. So I couldn't see why they couldn't do 2 New Zealand games on Saturday. But yeah, look, I guess that is the one flaw. Super Rugby has, to be fair to Super Rugby, they have been open and saying, look, this is a season of experimentation. We are open to feedback. You've seen that with Fantasy Rugby. And now they are quite open to feedback with this. So it's a new format. So, but having said that, yeah, you would have thought, it's not something. It is something that an AI model would have been easy. That they could. It's surely a scenario that they would have seen. So I don't know what's going on, but let's fingers crossed that the results in the other 2 games don't render Brumbies, that there will still be something to play for in Brumbies Hurricanes. Can't imagine. Personally, I think Crusaders and Chiefs are the reigning favorites. Although don't write off the Blues, they are, of course, the reigning champions. And look, I know they played some really awful teams in the last couple of rounds, but then again, the Blues kind of needed the chance to be able to remind themselves of the type of rugby they can play. And yeah, knowing now they've got that reminder, and the fact that it's Chiefs Blues, Bombay Derby, big rivals. Those ties have always been a flip of a coin. So yeah, while the Chiefs wouldn't necessarily be quaking in their boots, I think they're certainly hot favorites. I think certainly a little element of what's the word that escapes me? I think certainly they certainly cannot take the Blues lightly. And you'd expect the Chiefs hopefully to turn up. I think particularly, look, this is of course, we've had a couple of seasons now where they've really played the brights, and they really want to win the title, especially with Clayton McMillan moving on. For me, I think, I guess looking forward, I'm still thinking there's going to be a Chiefs Crusaders final in Hamilton in a few weeks' time. But look, I guess certainly, so this has been a very, very good Super Rugby season. Unfortunately, much as we hate to see the Rebels being caught, I think that was ultimately the thing that the competition needed. So it's certainly been refreshing to see the Australian sides more competitive than ever. Although, I guess unfortunately for our Australian friends, it looks like it's going to be a New Zealand domination. A New Zealand affair for the finals. But look, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the format? Has Super Rugby got it wrong this time? Particularly with the scheduling. And yeah, what are your thoughts on the Highlanders season? Of course, I guess it's a season that all of us pretty much wanted to put aside. If you like this video, feel free to like, and don't forget to subscribe.